On the morning of August 22nd, 1986, a man named Joseph Ngwe woke up in his home in the village of Saboom, Cameroon. He was confused, his head was pounding, and he felt weak, like he'd been sick for days. But really, what confused him was the silence. Joseph lived with his family in a small house near Lake Nyos, and every morning he'd wake up to the sounds of his village coming to life. Children playing, neighbors talking, roosters crowing. But this morning, nothing. He called out for his wife. No answer. He stumbled out of his bed and found her lying on the floor. She wasn't breathing. He found his 6 children also. All passed. Joseph ran outside, and what he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. There were bodies everywhere. His neighbors, the children, lying in doorways collapsed in the road, slumped against trees. An entire village just dead. And Joseph had no idea what killed them. What happened at Lake Nyos that night is one of the strangest natural disasters in recorded history, and when scientists finally figured out what killed all these people, the explanation was almost as terrifying as the deaths themselves. Before we get into this one, if you're new here, welcome to Real World Oddities. I cover true stories about things that actually happened but seem impossible. Mysteries, disappearances, phenomena that science struggles to explain. All real, all documented. If that's your thing, subscribe and stick around. These stories are only gonna get stranger. So let's talk about what happened at Lake Nyos. So Joseph is standing in the middle of his village in complete shock, and the first thing he notices, other than all the bodies, is the smell. The entire area reeks of rotten eggs and gunpowder. In fact, it's so strong it's making his eyes water. He starts going over and checking all the bodies, looking for someone, some survivors, his neighbors, people he'd known his entire life were all just gone. And what made it even more disturbing was that there were no injuries, no blood, no sign of violence. They looked like they had all just laid down and gotten to sleep. Joseph did find a few other survivors stumbling around, in that same confused state that he was in. Maybe 6 or 7 people out of a village of hundreds, and none of them could remember what happened. One woman said she remembered going to bed the night before and feeling perfectly fine. The next thing she knew, though, it was 2 days later and everyone was dead. Another survivor, a man named Ephraim, said that last night he remembered hearing a loud rumbling sound coming from the direction of the lake around midnight. Then nothing. Nothing until he woke up, that is. But here's where this gets even worse. Sabum wasn't the only village affected. About 6 miles away, there was a larger village called Nyos, which the lake was named after. When rescue workers finally made it to Nyos later that day, they found the same thing. Bodies were everywhere. Over 1,200 people dead. Another village, Cam. Same stories, hundreds dead. In total, 1,746 people died that night. And it wasn't just people. Investigators found over 3,500 livestock dead. Cows, goats, chickens, dogs, everything. Insects, the only living things in the area, were a few dozen confused, traumatized survivors who had no idea what they'd just survived. And when the first rescue teams arrived, they noticed something else that was deeply unsettling. The Lake Nyos, had changed color. It was normally this beautiful deep blue, but now it was this rust red, like something had bled into it. And the vegetation around the lake, for hundreds of feet in every direction, was dead. Just brown and withered, like it had been sprayed with poison. And there was this weird, investigators said it felt like the air was different, heavier somehow. So when news of this disaster reached the outside world, the first theory people jumped to was pretty obvious. This was a chemical attack. I mean, if you think about it, an entire region of people dead overnight with no visible injuries, a smell like rotten eggs and gunpowder, that sounds exactly like a poison gas. The Cameroon government immediately suspected terrorism. Maybe some extremist group had released a chemical weapon. Or maybe, and this was during the Cold War era, maybe some foreign government was testing weapons on a remote African village. Investigators were called in and they came in wearing full hazmat suits. They tested the air, the water, the soil. They were looking for traces of nerve gas, specifically chlorine, sarin, anything that would cause mass death like this. But they would find nothing. No chemical weapons, no toxic industrial spills. The tests, they all came back clean. Okay, so if it wasn't a chemical attack, what else could release poisonous gas? Scientists started looking at the geology of the area, and it turned out Lake Nyos sits on this volcanic crater. The lake itself was formed in the crater of an extinct volcano about 400 years ago. So the new theory became that maybe the volcano wasn't as extinct as everyone thought. Maybe there was still volcanic activity underground, and then it released poisonous gases that night specifically. So this made sense. Volcanic gases can include sulfur dioxide, which would smell like rotten eggs. That would explain the smell, and the volcanic gases can definitely kill people if they're concentrated enough. But when geologists studied the lake and the surrounding area, they found that there was no true evidence of recent volcanic activity. No lava flows, no fresh vents, no seismic activity at all. The volcano itself was definitely still extinct, so strike two. Now, things would change when a scientist named George Kling came over from the University of Michigan. He proposed something different, something that seemed impossible, but it fit all the evidence. He said the lake itself released the gas. See, Lake Nyos is what's called a crater lake. It's deep, over 600 feet deep, and it sits on top of a volcanic vent. And even though the volcano itself is extinct, the vent is still connected to magma chambers deep underground. And here's what Kling discovered. Carbon dioxide from the magma had been slowly seeping into the bottom of the lake for decades, maybe centuries, just bubbling up through these volcanic vents, dissolving into the water at the bottom of the lake. Now, normally this wouldn't be a problem. The CO2 would just stay dissolved in the water at the bottom because of the pressure, kind of how carbonation stays in a soda bottle until you open it. But Kling thought something must have disturbed the lake that night. Maybe a landslide, maybe an earthquake, maybe even just enough wind and rain, something that caused the layers of water to mix. And then all that dissolved CO2 would suddenly come out of the solution, like opening a giant shaken up soda bottle. Except instead of a little fizz, it released a cloud of carbon dioxide gas so massive that it spilled over the crater's rim and flowed down into the valleys where all these villages were located. And when they tested the lake water, Kling was right. So here's what scientists believe happened on the night of August 21st, 1986. Something, and they still don't know exactly what it was, disturbed the deep water of Lake Nyos. The most likely culprit, though, is a landslide on the north shore of the lake. There's evidence of a recent rockfall right around the time of this disaster, but not proven. So when those rocks hit the water, they created a wave that reached all the way to the bottom of the lake, 600 feet down. And that mixing action was enough to trigger what scientists are going to call a limnic eruption. All that carbon dioxide that had been building up there at the bottom of the lake for hundreds of years suddenly came out of the solution. And we're not talking a small amount. Scientists estimate that Lake Nyos released anywhere between 100,000 and 300,000 tons of CO2 in the matter of minutes. So just imagine with me for a second a lake just burping this massive cloud of carbon dioxide gas. It would explode out of the water with so much force that it creates a wave 80 feet high, and witnesses who lived further away said that they even heard a sound that resembled distant thunder. The gas cloud is so dense, CO2 is heavier than air after all, and it didn't disperse into the atmosphere. Instead, it would flow down the mountain like this invisible avalanche. The cloud would be moving at roughly 45 miles per hour, hugging the ground and filling up the valleys like you're pulling water into a bowl. And carbon dioxide is odorless, but in this case, the gas was mixed with other volcanic gases, hydrogen sulfide, which smells like rotten eggs. That's what the survivors smelled. That's what Joseph smelled when he stepped outside of his house. Now here's the truly horrifying part. Carbon dioxide poison doesn't just kill you like cyanide or nerve gas. It simply replaces the oxygen in the air. So these people in Nyos, Sabum, and Cam, they're all sleeping peacefully in their homes, and this invisible cloud of gas just flows through their villages like a silent flood. It's heavier than air, so it sinks to the ground, fills up houses, and displaces all the oxygen. People are breathing, but they're not getting any oxygen. They're just inhaling the CO2. At low concentrations, CO2 would make you dizzy and even a little confused, but at higher concentrations, it would cause you to pass out. At the concentrations in this cloud, estimated 15 to 20% or so, you would lose consciousness in seconds and then die within minutes. Most of these people never woke up. They just stopped breathing in their sleep. Remember Joseph Nkwe? The reason he survived is pure luck. His house was on a slightly higher ground level and the gas cloud didn't quite reach his bedroom. He did breathe some of it, and that's why he was unconscious for so long, 2 days or so, and that's why he woke up sick, but it wasn't enough to kill him. The other survivors, though, were on the same thing. They were either on high ground or they were in elevated rooms specifically. One survivor was in a 2-story building and slept upstairs. Everyone on their ground floor died. And remember how the survivors said they couldn't remember anything? Well, that's because CO2 poisoning causes amnesia. The lack of oxygen to the brain erases any short-term memories. That woman who went to bed fine and woke up 2 days later, well, those 2 days are just gone from her memory, literally erased. And that red color in the lake, when all that gas erupted, it churned up the bottom of the lake. The water at the bottom is rich in dissolved iron. When that iron-rich water mixed with the oxygen at the surface, it oxidized, basically rusted, and turned the lake red. And it would stay red for weeks. In the days after this disaster, the Cameroon government evacuated everyone within 18 miles of the lake. They were terrified that it would happen in quick succession. And scientists confirmed that it absolutely could happen again. See, that CO2 is still seeping into the lake right now as we speak. Lake Nyos is recharging with carbon dioxide. And if nothing is done in another 20, 30, maybe even 50 years, there would likely be another limnic eruption. But this time, people know it's coming. So in 2001, French scientists installed a degassing system in Lake Nyos. It's basically a long pipe that goes down to the bottom of the lake. The pressure difference causes water to fountain up. And as it does, the dissolved CO2 comes out of the solution in a controlled way, opposed to a giant bomb. If you visit Lake Nyos today, you can see this fountain spraying 24/7, slowly releasing all the gas that keeps building up. Now, they've installed multiple pipes now, and scientists monitor the CO2 levels almost constantly. The system works and the lake is now safer than it has been in centuries. But here's the thing. Lake Nyos isn't the only cratered lake in the world. It's not the only one that's sitting on top of a volcanic event. There are dozens of them, maybe hundreds, and most of them have never been tested for CO2 saturation. In fact, just 2 years before Lake Nyos, a smaller limnic eruption happened at Lake Minoun, only 60 miles away, and that one killed 37 people. Nobody knew what caused it at the time, but now we all know it was the same thing, a practice run for Lake Nyos. Scientists have identified at least 3 other lakes in Cameroon alone that could experience limnic eruptions, and there are similar lakes in volcanic regions all over the world: Indonesia, Italy, Iceland, and parts of the United States. We just don't know which ones are ticking time bombs. Joseph Nkwe, the man who woke up to find his entire family dead, lived the rest of his life near Lake Nyos. He said he didn't blame the lake. It was just nature running its course. But he also said he never slept soundly again. Every night, he'd listen for that rumbling sound, the one Ephraim heard before everyone died. Joseph passed away in 2011, 25 years after the disaster. He's buried near the lake of his family. The lake is still there, still beautiful, and still blue. and it's still filling with gas. So that's the story of Lake Nyos, a natural disaster so strange, so unexpected that when it happened, people literally couldn't figure out what had killed everyone. If you liked this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-world oddities. I've got links to more stories in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. If you're looking for something to watch right now that I would suggest specifically, check out that video right there.